On this episode of Money Matters with Jim Doyle, some families are open about money. Is yours? Guests Alyssa Lockhart, Harry Mutti, and Nathan Litter explore the collision between culture and money. Plan more, worry less. This is Money Matters with Jim Doyle.
Welcome. How deeply rooted are your money values when it comes to family, culture, tradition? For many families, these values are highly personal. Yet, for these same families, their views on money and estate considerations can lead to substantial conflict. Join us as we share insights to help navigate these challenges. But first, I sent Paige to ask about the source of your money beliefs and values.
Where do you think that your money values come from?
When I was young, my mother never worked, just my dad worked in steelworks, and everything you got, you really appreciated, and we're still the same.
Definitely my parents, definitely. Yeah.
I'll also credit my country for that, India per se, like culturally, I think we people, it's just so embedded in us that I think we are probably also the best recyclists on this planet. We never throw anything away.
If you ask me where the values come from, I think it initially comes from our parents. We always thought to save and things like that, to be thrifty and things like that. And I think when you go through an adolescent, you try to fight everything your parents did and undo your learning. So I think you pick it up from your peers.
So aside from family, what other influences shape our money values?
Well, certainly I do think that when we look at money values, they do stem from the home. But as we get older, we go out into the world, and I think that we're looking at the people that we surround ourselves with, the news media that we choose to follow, and when we go into the workplace, what are the values and the cultures of the companies that we stay with over long periods of time? That can have an impact on how we think about money.
Now, Harry, do we risk sometimes making money a secretive subject?
Definitely, families are like the way we are grown up. Our parents think they should not be sharing anything with their kids. Should not be telling them how the money is, they are bringing in the money, but they are trying very hard to meet the ends make, and that does make a huge difference how you want to look at the money.
So culturally, some families are open, some are closed. Alyssa, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that most families will come to me and say, in my family or in our culture. My experience is so many cultures and so many families feel that way. I think that it's a broader issue than many would think.
It's a broader issue. We'll be right back.
It's very, very important to have someone who's on your side and who can really guide you through the process, because it can be quite complicated.
Welcome back. When talking about money and culture, it's interesting how some families can agree on what can be talked about and what's off limits. Here's a tough one for you, Alyssa. Your kids ask you, how much do you make? How do you respond to something like that?
Well, in our house, we actually foster a sense of openness where money is concerned. I talk about how much we make in the context of how much we put forward as effort. So it's commensurate with effort. I make a different amount each year. If I choose to work harder one year, I may make more one year. I don't use specific figures, but I certainly do talk to them about the cost of the things that we do as a family.
Now, Harry, culturally, in some families, where does this conversation go?
It goes sideways most of the time. Parents don't want to share with their kids how much they are making, but they still want to, or they should still share how they are bringing in the money.
Is it a secret? I met up with Nathan Litter from Cole Harbour Law to discuss respecting cultural wishes when it comes to estate planning. So when talking about your estate plans, how do cultural norms hinder the conversations around finances or death?
Well, they can really cause a lot of problems, because you got to have an understanding of what people are looking for, and maybe perhaps at certain times of days or certain weeks or months that they cannot have those conversations.
Now, I've had families tell me they want the home to go to their eldest son, and when I ask them about their daughters, they have a different response.
Yeah, I think those are unique to certain cultures, but a really good idea is to take that next step with them and maybe investigate as to why that's the case, and perhaps alternate ways in which they can affect what they're looking for.
So Nathan, we know a little bit about the importance of getting good legal advice. What do you say to that?
Yes, I think it's absolutely essential. It's very, very important to have someone who's on your side and who can really guide you through the process, because it can be quite complicated.
Complicated. That's a surprise.
Yes, yes. A lot of people think that it's very straightforward and that these documents are set in stone, but there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of changes we can make along the way, as long as clients are engaged.
And if you've got families where their assets are spread out around the world, does that need for advice go up a little bit?
Absolutely. It's always good to have professionals in those jurisdictions, because they'll be well equipped to deal with the unique circumstances in each jurisdiction. And what you want to do is have everyone working together so that your estate plan fits like a glove.
In our practice, clients share that estate planning is hard to talk about, even more so when cultural norms enter the picture. Now, what's your experience with this, Alyssa?
My experience is that people feel that they will be value judged for the different cultural wishes that they bring to the table in estate planning. And our role as planners is first and foremost to listen, to hear, and to educate. Sometimes our legislation directly contradicts a cultural norm when it comes to gifting and succession planning. That doesn't mean we can't get around that. It means we have to have open dialogue.
Now, Harry, I got so many landmines with this conversation. Where do you want to go with it?
Yeah, it does make a huge difference to discuss with your family what your plans are, what your goals are. And based on your goals and your plans, you should bring up this topic, how to properly tax plan, how to properly estate plan in order to distribute your wealth.
Harry, I love the guidance here. Get some great direction. Let's go back to Paige as she explores sharing cultural perspectives around money.
How do cultural norms hinder talking about finances and death?
So my background is from the Middle East in Jordan. People were very open about discussing their financial situation. They even ask you how much you make. And then I moved to the US and got my higher education there. And I do feel a bit that it became more personal question.
If you have been brought up in a culture where everybody's doubting each other, also, you know, where people are consistently at loggerheads on every small thing, you lose that essence, you know, and then, of course, you want to just hold on to what belongs to you. You don't want to share with anyone. It can be small information, or it can be your money, it can be anything.
I don't know, it's a funny question, because I didn't see too much of a difference culturally. I'm originally from India. I mean, certain aspects even in our culture, people try to get a little bit close just because they're curious how much you make. In this culture, I think they know they're still just as curious, but they try to go about it in a more circuitous way.
So listen, we're all over the map with this one. One of openness, one of finances being highly personal. So Alyssa, what other points would you like to bring to this discussion?
With respect to culture, we do have in British Columbia legislation that says that we need to be fair, just, and adequate to each of our spouse and our children. And in fair, just, and adequate, there are a number of different ways to interpret those words. So I think that people need not to come away from the legislation. I think they need to embrace a discussion about it, learn about it, and then we can match their wishes, their personal wishes, their cultural requirements, and our legislation to protect their plan.
Now, Harry, I'm going to put you on the spot with this, but families sometimes come to the table and they say, you know what, I might know what the law is, but that's not what I want to do. How do you advise them?
They should always talk to their professional advisors, because every professional advisor in their legal field, tax field, have to say something different, and all these advisors should work together to put a proper plan where families could make enough to pass on to their legacy and also to pass on to their next generation.
Harry, I heard my favorite words of all, make a plan. We'll be right back.
Across cultures, my rule of thumb, one generation creates wealth, the next maintains it, the third destroys it.
Welcome back to Money Matters. For some clients we work with, getting clarity on their investment and estate planning objectives is the easy part. The real work begins when we uncover conflict within the family. Now, Alyssa, from your experience, where does this conflict come from?
Conflict stems sometimes from cultural differences between generations. It can also stem from gender tension within a family. And other times it can come from after a marriage of a second generation member, the interloping spouse.
Now, we were talking about this during the break. Are you really married?
Yeah, that's a tough question to find out if there is so much secret between the families, if families are not open.
Now, families keep secrets, you know. Where does that create problems in your world?
Well, when I don't know all of the facts, I might draft a plan around assumptions of fact. Now, I do a lot of work with my clients to drill down. Many blended families will say that their children are their children. I actually need to know if they are natural or adopted. It makes a difference.
I appreciate you opening that Pandora's box. Let's go back to Paige for some perspectives on finding common ground when it comes to kids, money, and the generational gap.
Do you think there's a cultural gap between generations when it comes to money?
Oh, not these days, not like it used to be. Not like when we were growing up. People talk about it more, I think, yeah.
Definitely, yes. I have a son who's 15. I see a lot of difference in him, and when I try to tell him or try to, explain it to him how difficult it's to earn money, because he has never seen something called lack.
Across cultures, my rule of thumb, one generation creates wealth, the next maintains it, the third destroys it.
So, what advice would you offer for parents whose kids have significantly different perspectives on money and investments than they do?
Talk to them, be open, find out what they really want to do with their life. Maybe it's in parents' best interest to find out their goals if they want to pass on their wealth to them, like for example business, or they're going to bring in somebody else. So they should be open, they should have a proper plan in place, because based on the plan, tax plan could be structured, legal plan could be structured, and that would definitely be much easier for them to deal with all the stress.
Now, Alyssa, we work with families where mom and dad want to preserve the capital and the kids say, heck no. Where do you go with that?
Well, I agree with Harry. I think that when we have children who share different values around money than we do as parents, it's easier to start that conversation by asking the children their perspective. No one wants to feel lectured to. We can share our perspective more openly after we have gained the conversational ground by asking them to start it.
Let's go back to Nathan as he discusses how people's fear of being misunderstood or being judged can leave them reluctant to seek help from their tax, legal, and investment advisors. So, in your role as a lawyer, how do you help families bridge that cultural gap between generations?
Well, I think it's important to find out what are the interests of each party and are there any commonalities, because it's really good to rely on those commonalities to start the conversation.
Now, sometimes people really get positional when it comes to an issue. How do you help them?
Well, you can have conversations in separate rooms and then kind of parse out what the interests are and then bring them together so that they can realize and really feel as though this is a collaborative event and not something to be separated by.
Now, do you think families are fearful that you may not really understand them or their families or the concerns that they have?
Yes, I think a lot of people, when they see advisors, lawyers, or any professional, really struggle with that initial meeting and getting out all the information out. It's important for professionals to have second meetings and third meetings so that you can build that rapport.
And families at the end of the day, they struggle with these issues?
They do. They struggle with all of the issues, and part of the struggle is that they've got that fear of the unknown. And part of my job is to really go in there and provide them with the information and the tools so they can be part of the process and not necessarily a bystander.
Now, Nathan talked about how people not only have difficulty opening up, but also fear not being understood by their advisors.
It makes a huge difference when clients opens up or when clients don't open up. I see this a lot in my practice when clients don't put all the facts together because it's very hard to see what they really want to do. Do their kids want to take over their business or want to take over their wealth or not? Do they want to donate? Do they want to preserve? So unless the client is not opening up with you, it is very hard to give them a good advice.
So Alyssa, I want you to pull the Band-Aid off on this one. What do you see in your world?
I see exactly that people feel like they're going to be judged. I need people to understand that lawyers are not here to impose the statute upon clients' wishes.
Our professionals have a lot to share if we allow them. We'll be right back.
Yeah, a lot of the times I see people who name their children as the executor, but then they hide the estate plan from them.
Welcome back. It's now time to get our panel's final thoughts on when culture, family, and money collide. Harry?
Yeah, opening up is very important. I see this a lot in my practice when I talk to clients, especially with a cultural background. They are not want to open up. They don't want to know how much wealth they have. They don't want to tell their even advisor how much.
Why? Why don't they want to do that?
It's more of a cultural thing. They just want to keep a very secretive approach to it, but without realizing what kind of consequences it could have for them. For example, in my personal case, my dad passed away, and my mom had no idea what's going on. So she had to go to my uncle to figure out, and then slowly it worked, but it does take a lot of time when there is no plan in place.
Now, is this typical in most cultures or a lot of cultures?
It is very typical in cultures where families are led by male.
Now, I know I've sat in meetings where we've got one of the people, they're just not talking at all. How do you get that opening up?
If there are two people sitting, husband, wife, it is my responsibility to get something out of wife or husband, what they really want to do, why they are coming here to meet me. If they, because if they don't tell me, there is nothing I could do. And in order to put a proper tax plan, you need to know what they want to do with their life, what they want to do with their wealth.
So having a bit of courage to have some of those tender conversations.
Exactly.
We've been talking about would family, money, and culture collide. Let's go back to Nathan for his final thoughts. So Nathan, what are your final thoughts?
Oh, when clients are struggling with perhaps their cultural norms and getting their estate plan together, I really urge them to come see a professional and get some advice and get some knowledge, because it can be a very complex issue. And when you have cultural norms on top of that, what you don't want is clients doing that in the background and struggling through it alone.
Now, you were telling me earlier about sometimes being invited to also meet with the priest and the family?
Absolutely. What we're looking for is to engage with people who the family members or the individuals feel as though are important and spheres of influence for them. That way we can have a better understanding of how they got their values, how their norms have evolved over time, and we can craft the right estate plan for them.
So when it comes to fulfilling mums and dads' wills, you know, if they're going to be carrying out the wishes, is it important that the kids be involved?
Yeah, a lot of the times I see people who name their children as the executor, but then they hide the estate plan from them. That makes it very difficult for the executor who's dealing with a time of grief to really give effect to that estate plan. Engagement and cooperation and conversation are the pillars here.
What I've heard is the importance of having somebody who understands, who truly understands, help you go through this process.
Absolutely. You're looking for a lawyer advisor who's really going to walk this road with you, who understands the norms, understands the role of them, so you can craft a tailored estate plan for them.
Oh, that's great advice.
Thanks so much.
Alyssa, so many wonderful thoughts raised here. What are your perspectives that you'd love to share?
Absolutely. In my personal world, I deal with it as well. In my professional world, every day, it's what we do. Personally, I'm Hungarian, and I come from also a background where the elder grandfather would control the money in the family, not in an aggressive, jealous way, but in a way of love and care for the family. But it meant that until he was passing the reins down, nobody else really knew what was happening with the assets or the business of the family. And that's not great from a tax perspective, or from a perspective of a younger generation eager to get involved with the family enterprise.
Alyssa, some absolutely wonderful advice here. So what are my final thoughts on today's subject, when families, culture, and money collide? You know, what an absolutely fascinating subject we've been talking about here. You know, it can be especially challenging when cultural perspectives must also be honored. I'd like to encourage families to have these conversations. First step, find common ground. Now, for more ideas, follow me on Twitter at JDoyleVancouver. I want to thank Alyssa, Nathan, and Harry for sharing their thoughts here today on Money Matters. Because financial aspects touch so many elements of our lives, it pays to get great advice. Plan more, worry less.